I had picked out a soft lavender dress, steamed it twice, and even took the time to style my thinning hair into something neat and presentable. I hadn't worn lipstick in over a year, but today I did. I smiled into the mirror, seeing more than just a mother. I saw someone proud, someone ready to be included. But by the end of that night, I would learn exactly where I stood in my son's life. Not beside him, not anywhere near the front. I would learn that sometimes the deepest wounds don't come from strangers. They come from your own flesh and blood, smiling while they push you to the edge of the room like you're a forgotten piece of old furniture. Let me take you back to the morning of that day. The air in Queen Anne was crisp, just cool enough to keep my windows cracked open. Birds chirped over the quiet rustle of trees outside. My hands, used to early rises and routine, brewed a small pot of coffee and set 2 pieces of toast into the toaster. I sat by the window, watching the sunlight spread slowly across the kitchen floor. I still lived in the same home where Jason had taken his first steps. The one my late husband and I bought back when Seattle was still affordable, and the city hadn't yet grown into the glass and steel giant it is now. I paid off that house in full, alone, one nurse shift at a time. I held on to it not just for the memories, but because it was mine. Jason was my only child. After his father passed, I became mother and father. Every basketball game, every science fair, every flu season, I was there. I didn't date, didn't travel. I worked double shifts and skipped vacation just so he wouldn't miss out. And today was supposed to be a celebration of the life I helped him build. His engagement to Sloane had been fast, 7 months from the first date to the ring. She was sharp, no doubt about that. High-level marketing, perfectly groomed, knew how to speak without saying much. The kind of woman who could make you feel like she liked you, even while subtly turning the knife. Still, I tried. I brought her my homemade peach cobbler last Christmas. She thanked me, then left it untouched. I sent her a birthday card in May. No reply. Jason always said she was just busy, that I was imagining things. I walked up to my closet and pulled the lavender dress off its hanger. I held it against my chest and looked in the mirror. There was a quiet hope inside me. Maybe today would be different. Maybe I'd be seated next to them, included in the toasts. Maybe the photographer would ask me to stand by Jason and Sloane for a few pictures. Maybe someone would say something like, "None of this would be possible without Miriam." The venue was upscale, of course. A waterside restaurant with glass walls and white roses everywhere. I arrived 10 minutes early. That was something my husband used to do. He hated being late. The moment I stepped in, I felt the air shift. Sloane's expression didn't change much, but there was a flicker of something in her eyes. Surprise? Annoyance? Jason walked toward me, suit pressed, hair stiff with product. I smiled, arms slightly open. He didn't hug me. He placed a hand on my shoulder and leaned in, his voice low and tight. "Mi, chone, jang chajading." For a second, I thought he was joking. I even smiled a little. Then I looked over and saw the long family table, right near the windows, filled with Sloane's parents, siblings, aunts, uncles, cousins. Empty seat at the end. Not for me. Jason gently turned me toward a small round table tucked behind a decorative pillar near the server's station. I sat down in silence. I couldn't move. I couldn't even feel my legs. People were laughing, clinking glasses. The MC began calling names. "Parents of the bride and groom, please come forward." I heard Sloane's father's name, her mother, her sister, then Jason's name. Nothing else. No mention of me. A few guests turned to look at me. Not all. Just a few. That was enough. That was all it took. That moment, sharp, humiliating, final, shattered something in me. And before the night ended, Sloane would hand me a contract to sign. Jason would stand silent again, and I would walk away from that table no longer the quiet, patient, forgiving mother they expected me to be, because something else had awakened in me. If this story resonates with you, especially if you're a mother who's ever felt pushed aside, I want you to stay with me. You'll want to see how this ends. The moment the applause died down and people turned back to their tables, I stood up without even realizing I had. My hands shook, but not from nerves. It was rage, steady and hot, simmering beneath the surface. I made my way to the restroom, locked the stall, and stayed there for 10 long minutes just breathing. The woman in the mirror looked pale. My lipstick had faded at the corners. I fixed it without thinking, like my body moved on its own while my mind stayed locked on Jason's voice. That voice, flat, dismissive, firm, telling me where I could sit. That moment would replay in my mind for years. When I finally walked back out into the main hall, most people were eating. Waiters glided between tables, setting down lamb chops and wine glasses. Laughter echoed from the family table. I paused just beside the entrance. No one noticed me. I wasn't part of the evening anymore. Then I saw Sloane walking toward me, smooth, confident, holding something in her hand. A leather folder. She smiled. Not warm, not fake either. Controlled. She said they were finalizing the budget for the wedding, that there were some expenses on Jason's side they didn't anticipate. Venue upgrades, photo packages, family seating expansion. Family seating. She said it so casually I almost laughed. She handed me the folder. I opened it. A 3-page document. First page titled Parental Contribution Agreement. Second page included a breakdown of numbers. $55,000, projected expenses. At the bottom, 2 signature lines. Jason Hale. Miriam Hale. I looked up. She was still smiling. I asked what this was. She said it was just a formality, just a gesture. That couples these days liked to show joint family involvement, financially and symbolically. That it would mean a lot to Jason. That signing it would help solidify the transition. The transition. The word dropped heavy in my chest. I flipped to the second page again. Small font, legal language. I saw words like lien, secured, collateral. I wasn't a lawyer, but I'd been around long enough to know those words weren't harmless. I asked where the money would come from. She said it would be deferred until post-wedding, that the document didn't bind me to any immediate payment, just made me part of the guarantee for the financial structure of the ceremony. Guarantee. I looked at the third page. Near the bottom, I saw a line that read, in small print, "The undersigned party agrees to allow property located at 71 Parkridge Avenue to be listed as potential security in the event of default. My house. My fully paid off 32-year-old house." She was still talking. I don't know what about. Something about legacy, family unity. I held up a hand and she stopped. I said I needed time to review it, that I never signed anything I didn't understand. Her smile faltered, just a little. She said she'd appreciate it if I could return it signed before the weekend, that they had vendor payments coming up. Vendor payments. I tucked the folder into my purse. Didn't say another word. Back at my table, the food was cold. I didn't eat a bite. I watched Jason laugh with Sloane's father, clink glasses with some co-worker of hers, throw his head back like he didn't have a care in the world. When he finally walked by, he noticed the folder sticking out of my purse. He stopped, tapped the leather, said Sloane had mentioned I was reviewing it. I told him I'd need a few days. He looked uncomfortable, said the venue needed confirmation, that these things moved quickly. I asked if he even read the document. He hesitated, then said Sloane handled most of the planning. I asked again, "Did you read it?" He didn't answer. He glanced away, then muttered that I was making this more difficult than it needed to be. That sentence sliced clean through me. I stood up. I looked him in the eyes and told him, very quietly, that I had given him everything I had for 34 years, that I never once hesitated to sacrifice for him, and that now, after all of it, he was standing in front of me asking me to gamble my home so he could have a designer archway and imported wine. He said I was overreacting. I smiled. I told him to go back to his table, that I didn't want to embarrass him. Not yet. He stared at me for a moment, confused, then turned and walked off. I stayed another 20 minutes. Then I left without saying goodbye. The air outside was cool, and I walked slowly to my car. I sat there in the driver's seat for a long time, not starting the engine, just staring straight ahead. This wasn't about money. This was about being erased. First from the photos, then from the seating plan, then from the narrative entirely. They were building a life that had no space for me unless I was useful. And suddenly a clarity settled into my bones. They had poked the wrong mother, and I was going to make sure they never forgot it. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my heart pounding in a rhythm that had nothing to do with fear and everything to do with fury. That folder was still on my kitchen table, the legal jargon practically glowing through the thin leather. I knew what it meant. I didn't need a lawyer. I didn't need a translator. I had lived long enough to recognize a setup dressed in polite words. At 6 the next morning, I brewed a cup of black coffee and sat at the table, arms folded, just watching the sun touch the folder's edge. A woman like Sloane didn't make careless moves. This was calculated, thought out, approved by Jason. And that realization snapped something loose in me. It wasn't just the betrayal. It was the precision of it. I stood up, grabbed my keys, and drove across the neighborhood to the house where Jason used to live before he moved in with Sloane. They still had a smart doorbell system there. He had once linked me in when I helped him dog sit during a work trip. The app was still on my phone. I hadn't checked it in over a year. When I opened the feed, I didn't expect much. Maybe a package delivery. Maybe some kids on scooters. What I saw instead froze me in place. There she was, Sloane, standing on the porch in workout leggings and a high ponytail. She was speaking fast, her voice sharp, clipped. Jason was off camera, but I could hear his voice. Sloane said the words plainly. "Just get her to sign. You know she won't ask too many questions. Play the guilt angle if you have to. We just need that signature so we can finalize the loan package." She didn't whisper. She didn't pause. She sounded like someone ordering tile samples. Jason responded with a sigh. Then a weak, "Yeah, okay." Then she said something that made my skin crawl. "Once she signs, the house is ours on paper. And once the house is ours, she's out of the picture." I replayed it twice. Then I saved the clip. My hands were steady. My breath was slow. I had proof. The sun was higher now. Light flooded my kitchen. And all I could think about was how stupid they must think I am. By 9, I was standing in front of Tommy's door. He opened it in flannel pajama pants and a mug in his hand. His eyes went wide when he saw me. I asked him if he had 15 minutes. He stepped aside without a word. Tommy used to work in mortgage underwriting before he retired. A sharp guy, detail-focused, honest in that gruff, small-town way that made people trust him. I showed him the document Sloane gave me. He read it once, then a second time. He set down his mug, looked at me straight. "This isn't a contribution. This is a lien document disguised as family paperwork. If you sign this, your house becomes collateral for a line of credit that you are not controlling. And if they default, you lose your home. I nodded. Then I pulled out my phone and played the doorbell clip. Tommy stared at it in silence. When it ended, he leaned back in his chair and let out a low breath. You need to make a copy of that file and back it up. I'll help you write a summary of what this really is. You can read it out loud. Clear, simple. Let everyone understand it. That was all I needed. I thanked him, walked back to my car, and drove straight to a small print shop on Fifth Avenue. I made copies, clean ones, highlighted. When I got home, I laid everything out on the table. The contract, the transcripts, the clip, the backup drive, and the letter Tommy promised to finish by the afternoon. I wasn't angry anymore. I was focused. The person I'd been 24 hours ago would have cried over this, would have begged Jason to see what he was doing, would have given him one more chance to protect his mother. But that version of me didn't exist anymore. I didn't need to scream. I didn't need to make threats. I had the truth. And now, I was going to let the truth do what it does best. Destroy the lie. At 2 in the afternoon, Sloane called. Her voice was all sugar. Said she hoped I was doing okay. Wanted to remind me about the signature. I told her I'd be bringing it to dinner tomorrow. I made sure my voice was just as smooth. She thanked me, like she thought she'd won. I hung up, pressed record, and saved the call. Then I stood by my window and watched the street for a long time. Everything looked normal. Cars passing, dogs walking, birds perched on wires. But inside me, nothing was the same. They tried to erase me with a smile. Tried to write me out of the story while pouring champagne in my honor. And now they were going to learn what happens when a woman who built everything from nothing decides to burn the lies down. I didn't need revenge. I needed the room to see the truth. And I was going to give it to them. All of it. Loud. Public. No more quiet dignity. This was war. And I was ready. By 5:30 the next evening, I had already showered, dressed, and laid out every single item I would bring. The contract, the highlighted copy, the transcript of the doorbell recording, the printed email from the wedding planner, the letter from Tommy explaining in plain English what the document really meant, and the USB drive with backups of everything. I placed them all inside a black folder. Matte finish. No label. Clean. Quiet. Just like I planned to be. Dinner was scheduled for 6. A small pre-wedding family meal at Jason and Sloane's condo overlooking Lake Union. Her parents would be there, her siblings, a couple of close friends. Jason asked me to come early. He said they wanted to sign a few things before everyone arrived. Of course they did. When I stepped into the condo, Sloane greeted me at the door with a rehearsed smile. Not warm, just tight enough to pass. She wore a beige blouse, cream slacks, no shoes. Her hair was slicked into a high bun, and she smelled like something floral and expensive. Jason stood a few feet behind her, watching, hands in his pockets. I walked in slowly, clutching the folder. Sloane gestured toward the kitchen island. A single chair had been pulled out, a pen already set down on a legal pad. The contract I refused to sign sat next to it. I didn't sit. I asked if her parents were coming soon. Sloane said they'd be arriving in an hour, but it would be best if we got the paperwork done first. I looked at Jason. He avoided my eyes. Then I placed my black folder on the island. I opened it, pulled out the highlighted contract, set it beside hers. Next came the transcript, then Tommy's letter, then the email from the planner. I laid them out one by one like cards at a poker table. Neither of them moved. Finally, I reached into my purse and took out my phone, tapped a few times. The living room speakers were still synced to Jason's smart system. Sloane's voice filled the room. Just get her to sign. You know she won't ask too many questions. Play the guilt angle if you have to. We just need that signature so we can finalize the loan package. Silence. Jason stepped forward. Me, we can talk about this. I held up a hand. The next line came. Once she signs, the house is ours on paper. And once the house is ours, she's out of the picture. I stopped the playback. No one spoke. Then Sloane did. Her tone was calm, but her voice cracked halfway through. Said the recording was out of context, that it sounded worse than it really was, that people say things when they're stressed. I didn't blink. I didn't budge. I picked up the printed email from the planner, held it out. This is your email instructing the planner to exclude me from the family photo session. You used the words too much clutter and optics. Jason's face fell. I turned to him. I was in labor with you for 19 hours. Your father missed 2 paychecks to stay beside me in the hospital. We built your crib by hand. We saved every penny for your college tuition. And tonight, you sat in this condo and let your fiancé use my name to secure a fraudulent lien against my house. He opened his mouth, then closed it. I picked up Tommy's letter. This is a statement from a former mortgage specialist. It outlines in simple language that signing your document would make my home collateral for a line of credit I do not control. Which means, if you or your fiancé default on anything, I could lose my house. The house I paid for by working double shifts for 30 years. Sloane said she didn't know the legal details, that she just trusted the process. I looked her dead in the eye. You knew every detail. You don't breathe without planning 5 steps ahead. And this wasn't sloppy. This was surgical. Jason sat down at the counter, silent. I stepped closer. You wanted me gone. You wanted me erased. No seat at the table. No name on the invites. No presence in the photos. And when that wasn't enough, you tried to tie me into your debt so that when things went wrong, I'd be the one paying for the damage Sloane tried to interrupt. I raised my voice. You're not going to spin this. Not tonight. I took a breath. So here's what's going to happen. You will shred every copy of that document. You will remove my name from any financial agreement related to your wedding. You will never again use my home, my assets, or my name in any of your arrangements. Jason looked up. What if we need help? Then you ask. Like adults, not thieves. I turned to both of them. If any version of this contract appears again with my name on it, I will press charges for attempted fraud and financial coercion. And I will bring this recording and every document in this folder to every member of this family, to every guest at your wedding, to every vendor who touches your ceremony. The room was stone cold. I picked up my folder, tucked everything back inside. Sloane's hands trembled. Jason still hadn't spoken a full sentence. Before I walked out, I turned back to them. I raised you better than this. But if this is who you've become, then you better believe I'm not the mother who turns the other cheek anymore. And I left. Not another word. Just the sound of my heels clicking against their hardwood floor. And the look on their faces, burned into memory like a trophy I never wanted, but damn well earned. By the next morning, the cracks had already begun to show. At 7:12 a.m., I received a message from Jason. No greeting, no apology. Just a line that said we should talk privately, away from the tension. I didn't reply. At 8:46 a.m., Sloane emailed me a formal letter retracting the contract. No acknowledgement of what she had done, just a line about misunderstandings and miscommunication, then a legal-style attachment titled Voluntary Release of Agreement. I forwarded the email to Tommy, then I archived it. They weren't sorry. They were scared. That same afternoon, I got a call from Lena Thompson, my late husband's cousin, and one of the most respected voices in our community. She sounded confused. She had received a message from Sloane's mother asking if something happened between me and Jason, that there were whispers of drama, that I had stormed out of dinner. Stormed out, I didn't storm. I detonated. And apparently the shockwave reached further than expected. Lena asked me what was going on. I told her. Not everything, not the clip, not the contract. But I gave her enough. Just enough to make her quiet on the other end. When she finally spoke, her voice was low and full of quiet rage. You gave him everything. Yes, I did. She asked if she could come by. I told her no. I wasn't hiding. But I wasn't entertaining either. An hour later, I got another text. This one from Sandra Price, Jason's godmother. She didn't ask anything. She just said she was with me. That was it. That was enough. I could feel it happening, the narrative slipping away from Sloane's hands. And I wasn't even finished yet. At 3:12 p.m., I received a call from the wedding planner. Her name was Melissa. Young, polished, professional. She apologized for calling, said she just wanted to clarify something. She said she had received conflicting emails about the seating chart and family photo list. She said she had seen a message from Sloane that explicitly stated to remove me from the primary family table and keep me off the printed program. But after last night, she wasn't sure what to do. I asked if she still had the original email. She said yes. I asked her to forward it to me. She did. There it was, from Sloane's personal account. Please exclude Miriam Hale from the printed materials. We want a clean, streamlined look. Clean, streamlined, like I was clutter. I didn't need to scream or bang on doors. I didn't need to beg for a seat at a table that was designed to erase me. I was building something better, something louder. At 5 p.m., I called Melissa back and asked if she had a few minutes for a private meeting. I said I'd like to clarify some things myself. She agreed. We met at a cafe downtown, neutral ground. I showed her the clip, the transcript, the copy of the contract, the highlighted lines. She didn't speak for a long time. Then she sat back and whispered. I had no idea. I nodded. I didn't need her pity. I needed her help. I asked if she would attend the vendor dinner, the one scheduled for the following Friday. I said I would be speaking. Not as Jason's mother, as a woman who'd been used, pushed, and nearly wiped off the family portrait by a pair of smooth-talking predators. Melissa looked nervous. Then she said yes. The plan was simple. I wasn't going to burn the house down. I was going to invite the whole neighborhood to watch it fall. The vendor dinner was meant to be a casual event, a thank you meal hosted by the couple for the caterers, designers, musicians, florist, photographer, planner, and both families. A pre-celebration. I arrived early. I wore navy blue, hair up, minimal makeup. I looked like myself, only sharper. I wasn't alone. Lena came with me. So did Sandra. Melissa was already there, reviewing her notes. Sloane and Jason walked in 20 minutes late. She wore white. He wore beige. They looked polished, tense. People clapped. Toasts were made. Champagne poured. Then, when the room had settled, Melissa stood up. She said she wanted to take a moment to acknowledge all the vendors for their hard work. She thanked them, smiled, then said there had been a small miscommunication in the family seating arrangements and that she had a guest who wanted to speak briefly. She nodded at me. I stood. Room quieted. I held no notes, no cue cards, just truth. I thanked them for their time. Then I told them a story. I told them how a woman spent her life raising a boy alone, paying off a house one paycheck at a time, saving, sacrificing, staying silent. I told them how one day that boy and his fiancée handed her a document asking her to sign away that house as collateral, disguised in wedding paperwork, hidden behind polite words. I told them about the seating chart, the program, the photos, the chair that wasn't mine. I didn't name names. I didn't need to. By the time I was done, the room was still. Melissa stepped forward and confirmed that the document in question had been submitted, that she had received written instruction to exclude me. No one clapped, but eyes shifted. Sloane's jaw was locked. Jason looked like he had aged 10 years in 20 minutes. And then, without warning, Sandra stood. She said I had done what most women never do. She said I had faced the people who tried to erase me and turned their silence into a spotlight. Then Lena stood, then 3 vendors, then the florist, then the photographer. And I stood there, watching it all unfold, knowing this was just the beginning. They thought they could break me quietly, but I broke the silence first. And now they would have to live in the noise I left behind. By the time I pulled into my driveway after the vendor dinner, there were already 2 missed calls from Jason and 1 from an unknown number I didn't recognize. I didn't answer either. I wasn't in the mood for stammered explanations or manufactured apologies. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a message. "We need to talk. Now. Before this gets worse." It was from Jason. Before this gets worse. I stared at that line for a long moment before tossing the phone on the kitchen counter and pouring myself a glass of water. I had never seen a man so visibly unravel as Jason did at that dinner. The silence that followed my speech didn't just hang, it echoed. Every single person in that room had heard the truth, spoken without theatrics, stripped of emotional fluff, just fact, evidence, and shame. And shame always travels faster than gossip. I didn't return any calls that night. I didn't check any social media. I didn't even turn on the TV. I sat in the dark, sipped my water, and let the silence settle in like a reward. The next morning, it all broke. I opened my front door to find a printed wedding program someone had slipped under the mat. The updated version. My name was on it now, right under Jason's, Miriam Hale, mother of the groom. They thought they could fix this with font. Then came the knock. Jason. Standing on my porch in a grey hoodie and jeans, hair a mess, eyes bloodshot. He looked like he hadn't slept. I opened the door but didn't step aside. He asked if we could talk. I let him in, but only into the front room. No coffee, no couch, just standing. He started talking fast, like a man trying to outrun an avalanche. He said he never meant for things to get this far, that he didn't understand the full contract, that he let Sloane take the lead because she was better with planning, that everything had spun out of control. I watched him like he was a stranger. He said people were starting to talk, that Sloane's boss saw something on Instagram about the vendor dinner, that her mother was furious, that the florist had backed out. I asked if that was why he was here, to manage fallout. He said no. He said he came because he finally saw the whole picture, that he realized how much he let her push me aside, that he was sorry. Then he started crying, not loud, but real. His shoulders shaking as he wiped his face with the back of his hand like he was 8 years old again. And for a brief second, the mother in me wanted to step forward, to hug him, to tell him it was all right. But it wasn't. I asked him if he really believed a woman like Sloane didn't know what she was doing, that she hadn't planned this from the beginning. He hesitated. Then he said something that chilled me. She told me if I didn't push you out of the way, she wouldn't marry me. It hit me square in the chest. Not because I didn't expect it, but because he admitted it out loud. I asked him how many times he stood by and watched it happen. The ignored texts, the skipped invitations, the empty chairs. He didn't answer. He just sat down on the edge of the chair, like a man carrying too much weight. Then he whispered something I'll never forget. I thought if I kept quiet, you'd still love me. I didn't speak for a long time. Then I told him the truth. I don't love the version of you who lets people hurt me to protect himself. I don't love the man who watched me be erased and said nothing, but I do love the boy who used to run down the stairs in his pajamas and kiss my cheek without being told. I love the son I raised, the one I know still exists, somewhere underneath the shame. He broke again, and I let him sit there, in that silence, to feel the weight of what he'd done. A few hours later, Sloane showed up. She didn't knock. She marched right through the gate and up the walkway like nothing had changed. She wore a crisp suit and sunglasses, as if it were just another business meeting. I met her at the front door. She said they were postponing the wedding, that it was a mutual decision, that tensions were too high, that Jason needed space. I told her that was smart. Then she asked if I planned to continue talking to people, if I was going to keep spreading this story. I smiled. I don't need to spread anything. I just told the truth. It spread itself. She didn't smile back. She said this could have been handled privately, that I didn't need to embarrass everyone. I leaned forward. You embarrassed yourselves when you built a wedding on deception and exclusion. All I did was pull the curtain back. She clenched her jaw. Told me this wasn't over. I told her she was right, because now it was just beginning, and the next part would be public. Jason walked out behind me then, quiet, calm. He told Sloane to leave, said he needed time, space, said he needed to clean up the mess he let happen. She stared at him like she didn't believe what she was hearing. Then she turned and walked away without another word. The gate clicked shut behind her. Jason sat back down on the porch steps. He looked up at me like a boy lost in his own house. I told him to take the time he needed, but if he ever wanted to rebuild what we had, he'd have to do it with honesty and boundaries, because love without respect isn't love. It's fear in a nice outfit. He nodded. I went back inside, closed the door behind me, and exhaled for what felt like the first time in days. The storm had passed, but the reckoning had just begun. The news spread faster than I anticipated. By the end of the week, it wasn't just whispers in the neighborhood or awkward silence at church. People were talking, vendors were canceling, and Sloane's picture-perfect wedding fantasy was crumbling like a stale cake. But I wasn't done. This wasn't about vengeance anymore. It was about exposure, about truth, and I was going to make sure every last piece of it reached the light. On Monday morning, I got a call from the community committee at the venue where the wedding was scheduled. A woman named Denise, who had coordinated Jason's birthday party when he turned 10, politely asked if I could meet her in person. Said there had been concerns raised from the management board after the vendor dinner. We met at her office, tucked into the side wing of the Lakeside Events Center. Her tone was soft, but I could see the edge beneath it. She had heard enough to know something serious had unfolded. She asked if I could provide a written account of what happened and whether any legal implications existed surrounding the wedding bookings. I handed her a folder. Everything was inside. The email from the planner, the redacted transcript, a legal summary from Tommy outlining how the wedding agreement posed financial risk under fraudulent pretenses. Denise took one look and sighed. She said they'd be reviewing all contracts related to Jason and Sloane's booking. I could tell she already knew the outcome. That same evening, Jason called again. His voice sounded smaller. He asked if I'd be willing to attend a private dinner with him and Sloane's parents. He said her family was upset about the damage to their name, their business connections. I told him I'd go, but not to smooth things over, to finish what they started. The dinner was held at a high-end Italian restaurant downtown. White tablecloths, waiters in vests, that kind of place. Jason was already seated when I arrived. Sloane's parents, Gregory and Elise Park, sat across from him like statues. I walked in, calm and deliberate. Elise nodded, tight-lipped. Gregory didn't stand. Jason introduced me without looking up. I sat. Right away, Elise started in, said she was disappointed, said the situation had become humiliating, said their business colleagues had started pulling away, sponsors gone, wedding vendors requesting clarification. I waited. Then she asked why I would drag family matters into the public sphere. Why I had made it a spectacle. I leaned in. Your daughter submitted a legally deceptive document to my son, attempting to attach my home as collateral, without full consent or transparency. I gave 30 years of my life to build that house, brick by brick. If that's not public enough for consequence, then perhaps your definition of family is just branding. Gregory bristled, said I had no proof. I pulled out the envelope. Inside was the signed email from Sloane, the contract with highlighted terms, a copy of the transcript. Gregory skimmed it, colour drained from his face. I looked at Elise. Your daughter didn't make a mistake. She made a move. And when you play games with another woman's life, you don't get to choose how she reacts. Jason hadn't said a word. He sat there, frozen between the woman he once planned to marry and the mother he tried to cut out. Then Elise did something unexpected. She apologized. But not to me, to Gregory. She said they should have reviewed everything themselves, that they'd let Sloane take too much control, that she had pushed this too far. Gregory stood, placed the papers back in the envelope, and said the wedding was officially off. Jason's head snapped up. Gregory told him the Park family wouldn't be part of any union built on lies and embarrassment. Elise followed her husband out without a backward glance. For a moment, Jason sat there in stunned silence. Then he looked at me. His voice cracked when he spoke. I didn't know what she was really capable of. I thought it was just stress, planning, pressure. I looked him dead in the eye. You don't get to plead ignorance anymore, not after watching her treat your own mother like a liability, not after signing off on her decisions without even reading the fine print. You don't get to be innocent when your silence was the weapon she used. He broke. Right there in that restaurant, shoulders hunched, eyes wet, breath shallow. And I let him, because this was his consequence, not mine. After a few minutes, I stood, took my purse, looked down at him and said the one thing that needed to be said. You want forgiveness. You earn it, piece by piece, not with words, with action. Then I walked out. I didn't cry. I didn't second guess it. The woman who once feared losing her son had already lost him. And now maybe, just maybe, she could finally start rebuilding herself without shrinking to fit someone else's story. This wasn't just justice. This was liberation. And I was done waiting to be invited back to the table. I was flipping it over. The next morning came heavy and silent, like the eye of a storm that hadn't finished yet. I stood in my kitchen, staring out the window, watching the sun crawl up behind the clouds. The street was quiet. Too quiet. But inside me, something had shifted. I wasn't waiting anymore. Not for closure, not for repair, not for Jason to come crawling back. The time for giving chances had passed. It was time for the final cut. My phone lit up just after 9, a text from Melissa, the wedding planner. She said she had been contacted by 2 major vendors, florist and venue, who had officially withdrawn. They cited reputational concerns. The incident from the vendor dinner had gone wider than expected. Someone had recorded it. It was circulating. Quietly. But it was out. Melissa said Sloane had accused her of leaking it. She hadn't. But it didn't matter. Once a story leaves the box, no one cares about the lid anymore. Then came the unexpected. A second text. From Elise Park. She asked if I'd be open to meeting. Alone. Said she had something to give me. Something she should have done weeks ago. Part of me wanted to ignore her. But the other part, the woman who believed in finishing things with clarity, texted back. Yes. 1 hour. My house. At 10:15 sharp, Elise stepped out of a silver sedan, wearing a cream trench coat and heels that clicked on my front path like clock hands. She carried a plain folder in one hand and a brown leather handbag in the other. She looked tired, not weak, but aged, like someone who had been forced to face her reflection in a mirror she didn't ask for. I opened the door. No pleasantries, just a nod. She stepped inside and followed me to the dining room. She sat. I stayed standing. She placed the folder on the table. Inside were printed emails. Not just from Sloane. From her. From Gregory. From early stages of wedding planning. Conversations where I was referred to as a placeholder, a wild card, a liability to optics. One line from Elise herself read, "If we can't control her, we exclude her." She slid it across the table. I didn't touch it. She looked up. Her voice was steady. "I won't ask for forgiveness. What we did was calculated, strategic, and cruel. We let Sloane take the lead, and we supported her because it benefited us. We never expected you to fight back. We assumed you'd stay quiet, invisible. And for that, I'm ashamed." I said nothing. She kept going. "This is your copy, not because I'm asking for anything in return, because it belongs to you now. You earned it." I picked up the folder. The weight of it wasn't in the pages, it was in the acknowledgement. Elise stood, gathered her bag. At the door, she turned back. "Your son still has a long way to go, but I think he's finally walking the right direction. Don't give up on him. But don't wait for him either." Then she was gone. I spent the next hour reading every line. The documents were dated, names, timestamps, even attachments. Elise had essentially handed me the full paper trail of the operation they ran behind my back. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I didn't burn it. I filed it. Because some things are better kept cold and neat, not flaming and messy. By mid-afternoon, my phone rang again. This time it was Lena. She said the church board had contacted her about Jason and Sloane's upcoming wedding listing in the congregation newsletter. Word had reached them. They didn't want to publish it until clarification was made. I told her to remove it. No explanation needed. Later that evening, Jason showed up again. No warning, just knocked once and stood there, looking thinner than I remembered, older than he was. I let him in. This time we sat. He said Sloane was leaving town, moving back with her parents for a while. He didn't say it like a man abandoned. He said it like a man set free and not sure what to do with the space. He asked if there was anything left worth rebuilding between us. I looked at him long and hard. You can't rebuild something that was never finished in the first place. He nodded, took the blow, sat there a moment, eyes down. Then he pulled a small photo from his jacket. It was us, from when he was 7, at the beach. My arms wrapped around him, both of us squinting into the sun. He handed it to me. I carried this every year, every graduation, every move. I always had it. I just forgot how to look at it. I took the photo. He stood. Before he left, he said something that stayed with me. "You didn't raise a coward. I just forgot how to be brave." After the door closed, I sat at the table, folder in one hand, photo in the other, and I realized something. This wasn't just about revenge. This was about reclaiming the silence I had lived in for too long, the silence where women like me are put when we're no longer useful, when we're too opinionated, too present, too much of a reminder that we existed before the weddings, before the titles, before the perfect photographs. I wasn't in the background anymore. I had center stage now, and I was just getting started. It was a little after noon when I arrived at the country club. I hadn't planned to walk in like that, but sometimes the moment chooses you, and this one was screaming for it. The parking lot was packed. Inside, a bridal brunch was underway. Sloane's name was printed in cursive on the welcome sign, surrounded by blush roses and peonies. A violinist played softly near the lobby. Every detail screamed curated elegance, controlled perfection. But no one saw the storm walking through the door. I spotted Lena first, hovering near the bar. She froze the second she saw me. Her mouth opened, then closed. She clutched her wine glass tighter. I kept walking. At the far end of the room, under a crystal chandelier, stood Sloane, flanked by three of her friends, dressed in champagne-colored dresses. She posed for pictures while a photographer snapped away. She laughed loud, hand over her chest, like some graceful debutante, basking in the admiration. Until she turned and saw me. That laugh stopped mid-breath. I didn't wait for her to come to me. I stepped forward, heels hitting the polished floor in steady rhythm. All eyes shifted. The violinist slowed. A few voices murmured. Someone whispered my name. Sloane squared her shoulders. "This is a private event. So is my family, but that didn't stop you from turning it into a public performance." Her eyes narrowed. Her voice dropped. "You need to leave." I held up the folder. Elise gave me this. But I brought copies. For everyone. Gasps fluttered. One woman stepped back. Another looked at Sloane, unsure now. I opened the folder, pulled out one sheet, raised my voice just enough. "It's an email. From Sloane, sent 2 months before the engagement announcement. She wrote, and I quote, 'I've already told Jason that his mother will not be part of the ceremony. She'll ruin the aesthetic. Don't worry. He'll fall in line eventually.'" Sloane lunged forward, hand swiping at the paper. I pulled back. "Careful. You wouldn't want to make a scene," she hissed through her teeth. "You are humiliating yourself." I smiled. "No, I'm correcting a record I passed out the papers." Line by line, people read the cold truth. Her manipulation, her control over Jason, her condescending words about my home, my clothes, my presence. One woman gasped aloud. Another snapped a photo of the document with her phone. Sloane's friends began stepping away from her like she carried disease. One of them, a tall brunette in navy heels, looked at me. I had no idea. "She told us you were senile. I let that sit in the air." Sloane tried to recover. "None of this matters. Jason and I are still getting married. He made his choice. That's all that counts." I looked her square in the eyes. Not quite. "See, Jason already withdrew the wedding funds from the joint account. The venue deposit bounced, the caterer cancelled, and your little write-up in the society paper has been pulled." That rattled her. "Liar, call them. Go ahead." She stepped back. Her face cracked for the first time. Her mask slid. Then the door opened again. Jason. He walked in like a man walking through fire. Everyone turned. The room froze. He looked at her, then at me. Then he spoke. The wedding's off. Sloane blinked. You're just angry. We'll talk later. Jason's voice didn't waver. No, we won't. I saw the documents. I heard what Elise said. I saw what I let happen. And I can't look at myself in the mirror if I pretend anymore. Sloane's voice rose, desperation spilling over. I did this for us, for your career, for our future. Your mother is toxic. She's jealous. She made you small. I was trying to help you grow. Jason shook his head. You didn't want me to grow. You wanted to mold me into your project, your accessory. You used me as a ladder and kicked the one person who always had my back. That ends today. A silence dropped like thunder. Sloane's hands trembled. Her lipstick had smudged. You'll regret this. Jason stepped beside me. Maybe, but I'd rather rebuild from the truth than rot in a lie. He turned to the crowd. Sorry to interrupt your brunch. Enjoy the champagne. I paid for it anyway. Then he nodded at me. Ready to go? We walked out together. Outside, the sun had shifted behind the clouds, but I felt warmer than I had in weeks. As we reached my car, Jason spoke again. You didn't just save me from a marriage, you saved me from becoming someone I wouldn't have recognized. I looked at him. You still have a lot to fix, I know. But he said it like a man finally willing to do the work. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I had to protect him. He was standing on his own. The morning after the ruined brunch felt like the eye of a hurricane. Quiet, still, but everything around it in ruin. I sat at the kitchen table sipping lukewarm coffee, reading through the documents I had gathered with Elise. Bank statements, real estate contracts, old texts. Each one a stitch in the unraveling fabric Sloane had spent years weaving. Everything was falling apart for her, and the silence that followed was a warning bell, not a relief. By noon, the phone calls began, first from Sloane's mother, then from Jason's old college mentor, then 2 members of the country club board. They weren't calling to support her, they were calling to distance themselves. One by one, her social scaffolding collapsed. But that wasn't the end. At 2:35 p.m., a process server arrived at her apartment. Jason had filed a restraining order. He included Elise's testimony and an affidavit from the housekeeper who had overheard a threatening conversation Sloane had with one of her friends about me. The documents were official, cold, direct. By 4 p.m., her lawyer called Jason's attorney in a panic, trying to spin it as a misunderstanding. But Jason didn't budge. That same evening, we met with our own attorney, a woman named Dana Liu. Sharp eyes, no nonsense. She laid out everything on the table. Jason's name had been tied to a business account Sloane used to funnel money from his trust. There were forged authorizations, missing funds, transactions that Jason never approved. Dana spoke clearly. We could pursue both civil and criminal charges, fraud, misappropriation, wire transfer violations. This wasn't just a family matter anymore. It was legal. Jason looked shaken but steady. Go forward. Every charge, every count. No deals. Dana nodded. We'll file first thing tomorrow. It was then I realized something strange. I didn't feel fear. I didn't feel guilt. What I felt was clean, like standing in the middle of a fire and knowing the flames weren't mine anymore. Jason went home to pack a few things. The apartment lease had been in his name, but he didn't want to stay there another night. Sloane was still inside, pretending nothing had changed. I drove him to a hotel. As we pulled into the parking lot, he hesitated. There's something I didn't tell you. I waited. She recorded me. Weeks ago. During an argument. Edited the audio. Made it sound like I was threatening her. She said if I ever tried to leave, she'd send it to the police or leak it online. I stared at him. You let her blackmail you? He nodded. I was scared, not just of what she'd do, but of what it would confirm about me, that I let myself be owned by someone like her. We sat in silence for a moment. Then I reached over and took his hand. You don't owe me shame. You owe me truth. And from now on, you owe it to yourself too. He didn't say anything, but his grip tightened slightly. It was enough. Back at home, I barely had time to turn on the porch light before the knock came. Lena, hair undone, jacket wrinkled. She looked older than I remembered. You happy now I didn't flinch? Depends. You here to apologize or escalate? She pushed her way in without being asked. Her heels clicked across my hardwood floor like accusations. You humiliated my daughter, my family, your son, everything we worked for. You mean everything you schemed for. She spun on her heel. Don't pretend you're innocent. You fed Jason poison about her, turned Elise against her own sister. You think this is justice. This is just spite. I leaned against the doorway. You want to talk about spite? Let's talk about the time you told Sloane to hide Jason's inheritance from him until after the wedding. Or when you coached her to fake that fainting episode in Aspen so he'd skip my birthday. Or when you forged my signature on that release form for the loan to her startup. Her face went white. You can't prove that I held up my phone. Already did. Her voice dropped to a hiss. You're going to destroy your own bloodline over pride? No. I'm going to protect it. From people like you. She stepped forward, her eyes wild now. He'll regret this. He'll come crawling back. And when he does, there'll be nothing left for him but shame and dust. I opened the front door wide. Then I hope he learns to grow flowers in dust. Now get out of my house. She stood there for a beat, chest heaving, then stormed out into the night. The click of the door behind her was final. That evening, Dana sent over the final drafts. Charges filed, motions entered, a temporary freeze on accounts pending court orders. Jason's name was cleared from the business mess. He had a long road ahead, but the worst part was over. And Sloane. She stayed silent. Her social media went dark. Her email auto-reply was set to vacation mode. But the press wasn't kind. Someone leaked the brunch confrontation. Then came the wedding cancellation story. Then Elise's anonymous interview with a journalist about what it was like growing up under a sister like Sloane. Everything crashed, and she had no soft place to land. By the end of the week, she moved out of the city. Rumors said she was staying with an aunt in Arizona. Others said she flew to Europe to lay low. I didn't care. Jason stayed at the hotel for a while, then rented a small apartment near the lake. Nothing fancy, just clean air and space to think. We didn't talk every day, and that was okay. Sometimes healing meant quiet and distance. But I knew one thing for certain. This wasn't revenge. This was reclamation of time, of peace, of voice. And after all the noise, silence finally sounded like freedom. 2 weeks after the storm broke, the air in the city changed, not just the weather, the rhythm, like everyone had moved on to a different beat, except the ones left behind to clean up the wreckage. I was sitting in the courthouse parking lot, engine off, fingers clenched around the steering wheel. I wasn't nervous. I was ready. Today wasn't about confrontation. It was about confirmation. Inside, the courtroom was cool and sterile, humming with fluorescent lights and low murmurs. Jason was already seated, clean-shaven, in a fitted navy suit. He looked firm, like a man who had finally stepped into his own story. Sloane entered 5 minutes later. No glam, no entourage, Just her and a lawyer with a thinning comb-over and a face like soured milk. She didn't look at me, didn't look at Jason either. She sat with perfect posture, eyes forward, lips tight, still trying to perform control. The judge called us to order. This wasn't a criminal trial yet, but a financial hearing. The charges had triggered asset investigations, Jason's frozen funds, the diverted investment accounts, and the apartment deed that had been quietly transferred to a shell company linked to Lena. Dana Liu stood up and started the fire. She presented a timeline. Each transfer, each forged signature, screenshots of private messages, emails, contracts rewritten without approval. A copy of Jason's notarized statement, followed by Elise's. Then the affidavit from the housekeeper, complete with audio clips. The judge asked Sloane's attorney if there was a counter-explanation. He stood, mumbled something about emotional stress, miscommunication, a misunderstanding of power of attorney. He stammered through a paragraph about trust in marriages. The judge didn't blink. I saw Sloane's knuckles turn white. Dana didn't stop there. She submitted the final nail. A signed wire authorization, time-stamped the morning after Jason had filed for separation. It moved $50,000 from a shared account into an offshore shell, Sloane's handwriting, her initials, her fingerprints. The room tensed. Jason didn't flinch. The judge ordered a full audit of all marital financials, immediate freeze on all joint assets, and a hearing scheduled for criminal fraud review pending a deeper forensic analysis. Sloane's lawyer leaned in, whispered something. She shook her head violently. The judge warned her once to remain composed. She stood, loud, no permission, just raw. This is ridiculous. You're destroying my life over jealousy and bitterness. Over what? A few mistakes, a few wires. I gave him everything. I made him someone. You want to ruin me because I didn't want to be stuck taking care of your lonely old mother forever. Jason stood too, calm, controlled. You didn't make me. You tried to buy me, control me, then bury me under your ambition. But you forgot I had a mother who saw through it before I did. Sloane laughed, sharp and hollow. You're pathetic, hiding behind a woman who's spent her whole life trying to prove she's better than me. Well, guess what? She's not. And neither are you. You'll never survive without me. This empire we built. You needed me, Dana interjected. This is not your empire. And it's not his either. It's theft. And you're going to answer for it in every courtroom this county has security was called. Sloane didn't resist, but her eyes found mine as she passed by. She didn't speak. She didn't have to. Her look said everything she couldn't say in front of the judge. This isn't over. But it was. Back outside, Jason exhaled like he hadn't breathed in a year. His hand brushed mine, and we walked down the courthouse steps together without speaking. Later that night, he called Elise. I sat nearby, pretending not to listen, but every word settled deep. You were right about her. About me. I'm sorry I let it go this far. I'm sorry I didn't listen when it would have made a difference. But I'm here now. For real. For good. Elise cried softly on the other end. Said she was proud of him. Said he didn't owe her perfect, just honest. After he hung up, we sat outside on the back porch. Jason turned to me. I used to think I had to keep the peace. That if I kept everyone calm, if I gave enough, bent enough, smiled enough, I could avoid war. And now I know sometimes you need war, not to destroy, but to protect. You taught me that I said nothing, because I knew what came next wasn't about words. It was about the quiet that follows a storm when the world starts to feel livable again. The next morning, Dana sent over the initial reports from the forensic accountant. multiple wire transfers tied to Lena, a consulting firm she registered under an alias, payments made under the table for legal services connected to Sloane's friend. The threads were unraveling fast, and the fallout was wider than we thought. Jason agreed to press full charges against both women. Elise volunteered to testify at the next hearing. The media caught wind. The headline was brutal. Son of retired judge brings down city power couple in explosive fraud case. We didn't respond to press inquiries. We didn't issue statements. We let the silence speak for us. But one evening, a letter arrived at my doorstep. No return address. Inside was a single photograph. Jason, as a boy, sitting on Lena's lap, birthday cake in front of them, her arms wrapped tight around him. On the back, a sentence. I only wanted him to win. No name, no apology. Just the last whimper of a woman who had lost everything because she believed winning meant taking. I folded the photo, placed it back in the envelope, and burned it in the sink. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about ending the cycle and choosing, once and for all, to live free from the shadow of those who never knew how to love without control. Chapter 12 would not be about war. It would be about healing and justice. The kind that doesn't roar, but rebuilds in silence. 3 months later, the courtroom was quiet again. No cameras, no reporters, no audience hungry for scandal. Just a single hearing to close the loop. The fraud case had moved fast once the forensic report confirmed everything. Sloane took a plea deal, avoided prison, but lost nearly everything. Multiple fines, asset seizures, professional blacklisting. She walked out of court that day alone, her name stripped from every boardroom door she once flaunted. Lena didn't show up. She had vanished from the city weeks before the subpoenas reached her door. The last known address linked to her was a condo in Miami, but no one had seen her since. It didn't matter anymore. Jason had removed her power the day he stopped letting her define him. As for me, I didn't need to watch her downfall. I had already buried her in my own way. Not with anger, not with vengeance, but with silence. Jason officially reclaimed full ownership of his stake in the company. Elise had taken over the non-profit full-time, and the two of them were learning how to speak again. Not just with words, but with trust. He still visited me every week, sometimes for dinner, sometimes just to sit. There was one afternoon, late spring, when he came with a brown envelope. He handed it to me like it was nothing, just an update. But inside was a legal document, titled Transfer of Title. He had bought a small cabin upstate, nothing grand, but quiet and green and paid in full. And the deed had my name on it. It's not repayment, he said. It's thanks for raising me to survive women like them, and for never asking for anything back. I didn't cry then. I waited until he left. Then I sat on the porch and let the breeze dry my cheeks. Some wounds don't heal by confrontation. They heal by distance and clarity, and choices made without applause. I had spent so many years watching people chase power, chase validation, chase control. But peace never comes from what you chase. It comes from what you release. I released my anger. I released my role in their chaos. And I released the need to prove anything to anyone. Sloane had reached out once. A typed letter. Cold. Legal in tone. Buried apology beneath justification. She ended it with a sentence that echoed her old bravado. I hope we can find a civil way to coexist. I never replied, because I had already found a civil way to coexist. It was called absence. Lena never wrote. But one day, Elise showed me a message. It had been sent to the non-profit's inbox. No name, just a single line. I thought money would make me irreplaceable. I was wrong. That, too, was enough. By summer, the company was running smoother than ever. Jason had cut ties with every executive who enabled the cover-ups. His leadership was quiet now, not performative, not showy, but rooted, steady. He kept a photo of us, me, him, and Elise, from when he was 10, on his desk. Said it reminded him of what really mattered. And Elise, she didn't ask for perfection. She only asked for effort, for presence, for honesty. The last dinner we had before my birthday, Jason raised a glass. To the ones who taught me what love isn't, so I could finally understand what love is. We clinked glasses, and I finally exhaled. The story didn't end in fire. It ended in freedom, real freedom, the kind you earn by walking away, not by winning. And maybe that's what justice really is. Not the destruction of the guilty, but the restoration of the worthy. If this story moved you, I invite you to reflect with me. Have you ever had to walk away from someone who tried to control your life? What helped you reclaim your peace? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your voice matters here. And if you've been through something similar, know this: healing doesn't always come from revenge. It comes from choosing yourself. Thank you for staying until the end. Tap like if this story meant something to you, and don't forget to subscribe for more powerful tales like this one. See you in the next story.